Big statement there by Prime Minister Modi at a plenary of the BRICS summit. Prime Minister Modi's big statement at BRICS. The BRICS represents 40% of humanity. Reiterates his comment about supporting dialogue and diplomacy and not war. This is after he made that comment directly to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, yesterday. Also talks about the global south. Very, very significant viewer at a time when India is at loggerheads at one level with the West. Now seen with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, two leaders who the West label as the most isolated world leaders. Prime Minister Modi talking about how the BRICS is now representing 40% of humanity. Talks about how the relationships between these three countries, the relationships between the countries of BRICS, Africa, Russia and India is going to be the future of geopolitics, the future of the international order. So a great deal of messaging coming in from the Prime Minister, where he talks about this is an era of peace, not of war. He talks about the need to stop the radicalization of youth. This is something that is a problem that Europe is facing in large measure right now. He also talks about how dialogue and diplomacy needs to be the way forward and not war. Remember, the Prime Minister had met the President of Iran yesterday. India has a very good relationship with the Israeli leadership as well. India has met with the United States earlier this year. Today and yesterday was the third meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Vladimir Putin just so far this year. There have been two meetings between Modi and the Ukrainian President Zelensky. So whichever war the world is experiencing right now, Indian foreign policy positions this country in a unique way, insofar as being able to say that dialogue and diplomacy needs to be the way out and not confrontation. I want to bring in a quick word from Geeta Mohan, our foreign affairs editor, who's been tracking every part of this. Geeta, what stood out for you from what the Prime Minister has said at the BRICS?
Well, all the pointers that you just spelled out, Shiv, some of them very, very significant. Remember, BRICS is expanding. It is a counter, and it has become a powerhouse. Having countries not just like Russia, India, China, which was originally RIC, we've seen the expansion from there to Brazil, South Africa, now 5 more countries, which includes the UAE. So it is going to be very important to see what the conversations and what we'll get to learn after the sessions are over. Some of them are closed doors. So what the conversations are going to be very important, because there are two conflicts and two important protagonists of the conflicts in the room. Russia on the Russia-Ukraine front, and Iran on the Israel-Hamas front, and the Israel-Iran front, if you may want to call it that. So you have very important countries in the room. Nobody wants war, but how to move forward. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been spelling that out for everybody. But he's also highlighted some very important issues, Shiv. Double standards by the world, double standards of the world when it comes to terrorism, counter-terrorism. And that certainly is an area that's of massive concern to India. India continues to face terrorism. We just had a terror attack in Kashmir. And despite that, there is no consensus even in defining the word terrorism at the United Nations. So highlighting that has been very important, apart from the fact that he does speak about how these countries need to come together. And right now, I see many other aspects, Shiv, and we can discuss that in detail later. But BRICS is an alternative. We are looking at de-dollarization of the economy. They're talking about the BRICS Bank has been there for a very long time. But should they start dealing and trading in local currency or have a BRICS currency, then it could spell a lot of trouble for those who are trying to control global economy through their currencies.
The power of BRICS, the future of a international grouping that represents 40% of humanity, the double standards of the West. Many, many big takeaways from the Prime Minister's address at the BRICS Summit. I want to introduce all of our guests joining us on this special broadcast this evening. Geeta continues to stay with us. Sana Hashmi, welcome. She's a visiting fellow with the Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. She's based in Taipei. Sana, good to see you. Lieutenant General D.B. Shiketkar is a former Deputy Director General Military Operations. He's a well-known commentator on all things strategic and military. Veena Sikri is a former Indian ambassador and diplomat and a commentator on international affairs. A very warm welcome to all of you. Over the next couple of hours, we are hoping to get very deep into the big Modi-Xi meet, and I'll get to that in just a moment, but I wanted to get some opening comments from our guest joining us now on what the Prime Minister has just said at BRICS. Veena Sikri, I'd like to start with you. What stood out for you? The importance of BRICS has assumed a kind of larger-than-life aspect this time, given what's going on between India and especially the West, but also everything that's going on between Israel and Iran and in other parts of the world. What stood out for you?
Well, I must say that one of the most important comments that Prime Minister has made, maybe not in today's speech, but which came out in the last couple of days, is that BRICS is not an anti-Western grouping, it is a non-Western grouping.
Yeah.
I think this is a very important concept, that BRICS has now established itself as a meeting of the global South. Of course, Russia and China are there, who are not always considered as part of the global South. But I think India's being there, and the way in which this has evolved from the RIC, from Russia, India, China, to Brazil, Russia, India, China, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now the additional members coming in, this shows the growing importance that the world is feeling for this non-Western grouping. I think that's very important, because most of the comments that our Prime Minister made in his speech reflected the achievements of BRICS, the way they have literally built it up one brick at a time, whether it is on trade, whether it is on environment, whether it's just the number of people who are there, you know, as you said, representing 40% of the world's population. This is absolutely significant. And I think the points that he made on double standards is very important, because it hits right home, considering what we are facing from Canada and other countries, and what the comments that Panun is making from American soil. All these shows to us, and the respect that our Prime Minister is receiving in BRICS, not only from President Putin. They had a meeting yesterday, and again, President Putin said that he is, looking forward and welcoming Prime Minister Modi's role in resolving the Ukraine-Russia crisis. Then his meeting with the President of Iran. The President of Iran said the same thing about the West Asian crisis, about the Israel-Hamas conflict. So I think that our Prime Minister's very significant role in this meeting of BRICS as the leader, the outstanding leader of the moment, the way he is being welcomed as a person who can resolve global problems, whether it is in Ukraine, Russia, or the Middle East, the way that he has explained how India has contributed to the building up of BRICS. This is very important. Whether he was talking about financial transactions, financial infrastructure, digital payment infrastructure, whether he was talking about the contribution on green energy, contribution on the environment, and welcoming other BRICS countries to join and add their contribution. So he is obviously focusing that BRICS has done a lot to do more, to be a relevant player. We need to come together and build on these achievements of the past. I think it's a very important statement, and it reflects in many ways the importance being given to Prime Minister Modi's presence at the BRICS summit by all the players, not only at the negotiating table of BRICS, but outside in his meetings and the bilaterals. Of course, we are all looking forward to the bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi.
And that is where our gaze is fixed right now, because the BRICS plenary session is over. The Prime Minister has spoken. The time window for that Modi-Xi bilateral is anywhere between 4:40 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. Let's put all our guests on the screen quickly. Bringing in Lieutenant General Shiketkar for a quick comment on this. General Shiketkar, the Prime Minister, not for the first time. Let's put all the guests on the screen quickly. General Shiketkar, the Prime Minister, not for the first time, has said, dialogue and diplomacy needs to be the way forward, not war. Very important in the context now, especially given that the Indian and the Chinese leadership are about to hold a long-expected bilateral that is going to happen now after the two sides have announced some kind of resolution. All disclaimers apply. There is no euphoria that we are certainly reporting. We are very cautious when it comes to reporting anything pertaining to China. But your opening comments, sir, as we count down to the Modi-Xi handshake.
Having heard the Honorable Prime Minister very carefully, his comments during his address to the conference, I must say, he totally avoided any conflict situation anywhere, though he made an oblique reference what is happening in the country without naming anybody. And that shows the maturity of the leadership, political leadership in country. Secondly, what will be discussed between the Prime Minister of India and the President of China after some time will be totally a different issue. There will be a number of common issues, but I do hope that it will be, one of the things will be that peace and progress can only result in a longer term friendship and development between any nation and all the nation. That is probably going to be the theme.
Yes.
Secondly, I don't think at that level they'll make a mention about the conflict which is going on in Galwan or on the border and so on. Because we must remember that just in 2019, when the President of China came to India, in Tamil Nadu he was hosted. After going back, within 6 months we had Galwan.
Yes.
So therefore, correct. I think this reference will hold good, but without naming anybody and without saying so. What transpires between the two of them at an individual level will be a different thing. I don't think any communication will be issued on that thing as to what they discussed, but it is reasonable to assume, having been the student of the international science and the strategy, it is reasonable to assume that some oblique reference will certainly be made by India that in case the two countries have to progress forward together, conflict is not the answer. Conflict has never been the answer to any situation. And
Sana,
that is how probably the dialogue will
let
go
me bring
on.
Sana Hashmi in also for a quick opening comment before we hopefully get some live images from Kazan of the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President. Sana, you've been, very correctly, and I agree with you, noting a sound of caution as far as India and China are concerned. The surround sound, has cleared the decks for some kind of a resolution. We affirm that this is going to be a long, arduous, complicated, and by no means straightforward process towards de-induction, de-escalation and disengagement. But where do you stand on this particular meeting itself? If we zoom in now to Kazan, to this handshake that's expected between Modi and Xi, what do you expect to see happen?
I think it's definitely a huge development. Specifically, Prime Minister Modi is meeting President Xi after 5 years. And if we look at it, other world leaders have actually met Xi Jinping. So this is not something that is not supposed to happen. So I do believe that that's a good development. But when we talk about the recent agreement and the prospects of India-China relations, I'm not very optimistic. It's just a CBM. Facts on the ground hasn't changed and it is not going to change. So it's just an agreement. It's not the border dispute resolution. We are definitely going to see the standoff as well. So I think the idea was to normalize and stabilize the relation. And this meeting was very important in that context. And I do believe that this is a step in the right direction.
A step in the right direction. The mood on the ground has been set.